I'm Dr. Anita Blanchard in Psychology and Organization Science, and I put my email address up here because sometimes students will send me their Vitae afterwards. I'll give you a quick look through of what looks good and not, particularly formatting and any information or words you need. So this is going to be a workshop on creating an application packet. We are going to be focusing mostly on PhDs and creating CVs, curriculum vitas, for people who are going the academic market. That said, much of the information I'm going to go over is going to be generalizable to also for master's students going onto the applied market, but I am covering information on both topics. Okay, so for the academic market, I've also highlighted in red the really important bits of information that you will always be sending out when you apply for an academic job. Your CV, a cover letter, as well as information about your research program. You may also have to include teaching philosophy. It depends on what university or college degree you're applying for, as well as some letters of recommendation, which are kind of out of your hand, but folks are doing that too. For the applied market, the two things that are most important are your resume. It's a different word because it looks different and it's actually structured differently, as well as your cover letter, which is still very, very important. Those are both highlighted in red. Okay, so parts of the job application package that you'll be sending out, some parts are mostly standard, so you can make your CV and your resume generally once and then be sending it out to everyone. That's going to be standard, unless you're applying for very different jobs. If you're applying for a teaching job and a research job, you might want to kind of highlight certain things differently. Or if you're applying for like a postdoc or an application for an applied job, you want to have different resumes. So that's mostly standard. Usually standard would be your teaching philosophy and your statement of research program. And then in red, highlighted and underlined is the part that says you need to tailor specifically to the job. The cover letter must be tailored to the job. Because a standard cover letter makes you look like someone who's just applying to everything and not a serious candidate for the job that's there. So we're going to talk about what you need to put there to make sure you look like the best candidate for the job. Okay, for the CV, it's like a resume, but it's for academic and research jobs. I have talked to some of my hard science folks, physics folks, chemistry folks. Some of their resumes look more like CV, so it may be applicable for you to create a CV like instead of a resume. It contains basic information, your name and contact information, education, professional appointments, publications, research, and grants, your teaching, industry, and service experience. And I would encourage you to search out your discipline's orders. In psychology, in the social sciences, this is the order we put them in. I've asked some of my friends or colleagues in physics, this is the same order too. But as I've been trolling around other professors' Vitas, I've seen them in different orders. So make sure you have someone in your program, make sure that this is the order that you would put it in if you were sending out a CV. It is slightly different if you're sending out a resume. So what's important for your CV? In red, and then red I know is important, blue might be important, and then the standard information. Name and contact information, education, professional appointments are very important on the CV, as well as your publications and research. Teaching may or may not be important. It depends on if you're applying to a teaching college or you're applying to more of a research university. Industry and service experience are just the standard information you may or may not have on your application. For the resume, the most important things are your education, your degree, what experience you have in industry before or during your degree. And I have up here in blue classes, because some places when they're hiring people out of a master's program, they know you may not have a lot of experience, but they want to know that you've had exposure to particular classes. So that would be something depends on what job you're applying for, and I'd talk to your advisor or someone in your field about whether you need to include that in there. We're going to go through each section, information you can include, you should include, and you should not include. Okay, so the name and contact information should be centered at the top of your Vita. You put your full name, you put your snail mail address up there, you put your phone numbers that you can be reached at. I would also encourage you, when you go on the job market, to change your voicemail reception, that it's professional and it's not music playing or it's not you being kind of cool, that just says, hi, this is Anita or Anita Blanchard, I can't take your call right now, please leave a message. Make sure it's professional because you don't want to wait until you've already gotten a message to realize that the music you're playing before you answer your call is not professional. And your email address. Okay, I would encourage you to either use your UNCC one, although if you graduate, they kind of cut your email off pretty quickly here. Yeah, so you might want to have a Gmail account, but you do not use the unprofessional redhotmama@yahoo.com. I say that, and I still tell you that I know, right? I still get people applying for jobs where they're using their one they created in high school. Okay, do not do that. Make sure it's some basis of your name that is appropriate and somewhat professional sounding. Next, your educational history. You start with your highest education and the expected, either the date or your expected date of graduation. You put your dissertation and/or your thesis topic or name as well as your major advisor. For some programs, they really want to know who you've worked with going forward, and I'm pretty sure some of the applied jobs, they want to know who their contact is that they have back with you at UNC Charlotte. For academic appointments that you can put up there, for a CV that would come next, so you'd have your name, your educational history, and then if you've taught before. Okay, so that's for a CV particularly, if you've taught before. And you could put UNC Charlotte lecturer or adjunct faculty from the year you started until present. Okay, that's what it looked like. And at this point, you don't want to put the actual classes that you've taught. You'll put that later on, but you want to put if you've had any academic jobs on your CV, because that does give you some credibility and it shows that you've been doing some teaching, makes you look attractive to prospective hirers. The next section is your bragging section. So we have name, education, academic appointments, this is for the CV, and then where you get to brag. And this is where you have any grants that helps you stand out as a graduate student applying. Any awards you've received. This is really the thing that you want to highlight that's really important, that's different than other people might have. So grants, fellowships, recognition, awards, this is your bragging part. It really does stand out. Not everybody will have them, that's okay, but if you do have that opportunity, you want to put this up here right now. After that, research. I have a long list of research options. This is not because I expect you to have these. This is because I want you to think about creatively what you can put up there, okay? I also have them in order of fanciness, your fancy pants part, okay? So if you've written a book, that comes first. Second would come peer-reviewed journal articles, and I would actually use that as peer-reviewed journal as the title for each section if you have these. What journal articles you have, any peer-reviewed book chapters you have, invited book chapters that you have, any encyclopedia entries. At this point, I might be starting to talk about things you might actually have, and hopefully you might have some of these. Encyclopedia entries, published conference proceedings, conference presentations, research reports, research under review, conference presentations under review, and then research in progress. I don't think you have any books, but if you're going on the market, you certainly have some research in progress, okay? And I will tell you that this looks attractive. When we were just hiring some folks, we did a faculty search last spring, and we had folks who were doing the research. They had a few things under review. That looks good. A few conference presentations under review, a few things in progress with also, this was nice, and this is something that we picked up last semester. They put where they were targeting, the journal they were targeting it to. And aim high. Even if you really think it's going to be in a B-level journal, when you put it on your Vita, you're going to be saying, I'm going to submit this to the best journal in the area. People are like, oh yeah, she's going to submit this to the Journal of Applied Psychology. Ooh, that's fancy. Okay, aim high. It looks good for your application. So I assume you'll have quite a few of these going on the market. That's okay. That's fine. We expect that. I don't expect a lot up here, but it looks good if you do. Okay, any questions on this part? I would be thinking about this before you start putting your CV together so you have some ideas. And in highlighting your own research, chronological order depends on the discipline. I like to have the most recent at the top I've seen other people, usually more senior people, because then they just add it at the bottom. But I think you should look at your discipline, troll around on your site and ask your advisors, but usually put the most recent at the top and bold your name, okay? So that they can quickly look through and see where you are on the list. It's just a little trick that, that we use to kind of help you stand out a little better. Also, do not at this point explain your research and what you're doing. You're going to do that in your research statement. I've seen some people do this, more senior people. This is not the time where you're doing that. You explain your research in your research statement. Then you can put a list of the classes taught. So you've got, all right, so after you put your research, courses taught, and or courses interested in teaching. Now this would be a place, if you didn't want to highlight this in your cover letter, or you might want to put it both. If someone says they're hiring for someone to teach research methods, what should you put in your cover letter on your Vitae that you'd like to teach? Research methods. Okay, so be a little clever about this. If they say they want this, say that's what you want to do. Okay, think about that. So if they're asking for a particular interest, or you can put that in this section. For the CV, you may or may not have industry jobs. It's certainly not that important if you're going into an academic job. It might be interesting to think, well, why did they take 4 years off between their undergrad and graduate and they work somewhere? That's fine, but it's really not as important. For the people who are masters, this is the most important part. Where have you worked in industry? You may or may not, that's fine. In fact, I would encourage you, if you're getting your master's and you don't feel like you went straight out of undergrad, to think about some of the responsibilities you've had if you've worked in a lab or any projects you've worked on, to think about what responsibilities you've had and list that as part of your job. That counts as a job. I've even advised undergrads, this is not the case for you, but even babysitting is a job and you had to manage people in that experience. So you can put, you can be creative about some of those things, responsibilities you've had. Service looks good. It's not going to help you get a job. It may help you stand out in an academic job, but it's certainly not going to, so if you don't have much service, that's okay. But if you're thinking about an academic job, now is the time to start getting involved in some of these things. I do a workshop on what to do at professional conferences, and it's a great way to get some items for your Vitae to make you stand out. So things that you could think about doing or have already done. Have you been a reviewer for any conferences? Put that on there. Usually journals don't like reviewers for grad students unless they're a little bit more advanced, but if you've reviewed for a journal, certainly put that on there. Have you done any other volunteer activity at a conference? Again, if you had, put it on there. If you haven't and you're thinking about an academic job, volunteer the next conference you go to get some exposure and some experience. Any other reviewer activity, any professional positions that you've held? We have the Grad Student Council here, so you'd want to put that on if you've been involved in that. And also your membership organizations. And you'd want to keep those active. So I assume you're going to be a member in the primary conference or organization for your discipline. Hints for your CV. This is just for your CV, okay? Update everything as soon as it happens. So when you submit a conference or journal submission, you go immediately to your CV and you put it on there. If it gets rejected, you just take it off and put it somewhere else. If it gets accepted for an R&R, you revise that, but you keep it on there so your activity is always on top of your, top of mind. And when you get accepted to a conference, then you can just move it up to a conference presentation, call it Impress or Coming Up. Any job responsibilities? If you take on a new project or new responsibility at your lab, go ahead and update your Vitae with that. Research opportunities, any grants you applied for, certainly if you've applied for, you can put that under applied for grants to NSF or NIH or whatever. Teaching opportunities, even if you do a guest lecture in a class, that counts as a teaching experience. Put that on your Vitae because it's so easy to forget it when it goes time to update it. So every time you do some professional activity, and I want to get this on your head, you're updating your Vitae. A speaking engagement, any membership you've done. If you do it immediately and just every time something happens, you update it. When the job opportunity comes up, you've got it there and you aren't forgetting something that's going to make you shine. Check out what's going on with your department. If they have different standards than what I've told you, okay, I've tried to go for the maximum, but there might be some differences. Ask your dissertation chair to review this. That should be part of his or her responsibilities in mentoring you. I put in blue because the Career Center has workshops, although the grad students are different from the undergrad population, and sometimes it's not as fruitful there as it is elsewhere. So we also have the opportunity here at CGL to have a faculty affiliate review your Vita or your resume, and I've done that with students. It takes me a little while to get it into the loop of things to do, but I can review your Vita for you too. Now the cover letter, the next option. You have a professional salutation. If you have some letterhead, that looks nice. The first paragraph is something along the lines of, please accept this package of my application for the blah, 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 blah job. You know, put it all in there. Okay, and make sure you've got the correct name, the correct job, and if you have multiple applications, that you've changed the name all the time throughout your letter. You'd be surprised, folks. We just did a faculty search last spring. You'd be surprised what we were seeing coming through. People had not changed everything. That's not enough. Please accept this. That's not enough. The cover letter is really your opportunity to say why you are interested in that particular job. That is your one time to sell yourself specifically for that job, whether it's a cover letter to an applied or industry job or to academia. And it behooves you to read in detail what the job posting was, to do a little homework on the organization so that you can say, I'm serious about this, as well as any characteristics they're looking for. Okay? And I'm not kidding you. It really makes a difference. We're reviewing dozens, hundreds of applications for one job. Make sure that you stand out appropriately. Okay, specifically why you're a good match for that job specifically. If they say they want somebody to teach some classes, you say you can teach them these classes. If they say someone who has this research experience, you show that, as you'll see in my research, in my Vita, I have this research experience. Same thing if they're looking for an applied job. This is why I match with what you're looking for. You want to show how your skills and abilities match their needs. Okay, should briefly highlight important aspects of your research teaching that's noted in the job. Also, if you're applying for a job that's not in the most desirable location, it also is a good idea to say that you'd be happy to relocate. If you're doing a national job search, I would love to move to South Dakota. I've heard it's a great place. I have family in this area, you know. Some places are concerned. Now, Charlotte isn't. I lived in Los Angeles before I came here. Those were not, we knew everybody wanted to move to Los Angeles, and Charlotte's certainly a fun place to live too. But other places you may be applying to, they may be concerned. I don't want to pick on any one state, but let's, I don't know, we'll pick on the Dakotas, okay? That you really would be interested in moving there, okay? So that would be important to say that. It'll help you stand out. Also, in our program specifically, if someone had not done their homework, I'm in psychology and organization science. If someone had not done their homework, they wouldn't know that yes, it's a bachelor's program in psychology, but we have a PhD program that's interdisciplinary. And the people who stood out in our application were folks who said, oh, I'd like to teach in the PhD program. I hear it's with, see it's communication, sociology, management, blah, blah. It really makes it look like you've done your homework and that you're a serious candidate, and not that you've applying to 100 different positions and we're just one on your list. Okay, no job wants to think that that's what you're doing. With your research program, so we've got the Vita, we've covered your cover letter, and now let's talk about your research program, what you've done, what research that you've done, what you've found, where you've published it. It looks really nice when we're reading through to say, I worked on this project, it was at this conference submission and this publication. It's nice to go ahead and just repeat that in your research program. As well as where you think you're going with your research. So we're not hiring you just on what you've done, but also where you think you're going to go. You could have several streams of research. That's fine. That's not a problem. Or you have one overarching theme. They really don't care about it. You're likely going to just do this once, but it's possible that organizations or universities are going to be looking for specific things. You might need to tailor it a little bit. But generally, this could be something you just do once and hand out. Cover letter you're doing for every job you apply for. Many universities and colleges want to know what you think about teaching. So it's called a teaching philosophy. And they want to know that you've thought about it and that you have some way of approaching your teaching so that we know, something like not along the lines of, I like to talk the entire time and never let anybody else say anything. That would not be the good way to do this. So there's some things you should talk about. It would be important to think about this beforehand. What's your teaching style, if you're very interactive, very dynamic, if you like to make the students engage in group activities, that's something that's really popular, you can talk about that. So make sure you talk about your teaching style and how it meshes with your philosophy of teaching. Probably this is only going to be created once and sent out. Some places don't need it, but most places do want to know that you can both teach and do research. Letters of recommendation, you definitely have to ask your dissertation chair. If you don't have your dissertation chair or your thesis advisor write your letter of recommendation, that sends a very strong and bad message. Okay, so you want to have some other committee members write letters too, or lab directors you've worked with. I don't know how you can do it, but sometimes certain people write horrible letters of recommendation, and you want to avoid them. I don't know how you find that out. Find out from other people. If they kind of hedge a little bit when you ask them, then maybe that should be a sign to go to someone else. I've heard of people who've applied to jobs who someone on their committee was writing a horrible letter. They never got interviews. Finally, a friend took them aside and said, you need to avoid this person. They got that person off of it. They got the next job they interviewed for. So it can happen. Generally, it won't, and try to just keep your radar open to that possibility. I also recommend, because the last year I had a student apply to literally 100 positions. That's a lot. And the organization skills were still kind of a problem. What you want to do is give your recommender what due dates. So if you can have a spreadsheet, or what I actually finally said is, tell me everybody who's due in November and who I'm supposed to send it to. Then send me a list of everybody who's due in December, and then January and February. For your folks, give them the due dates, the program names and positions, particularly if you have a degree that could go to a couple of different departments. You want to make sure that you're not sending your communications application to a psychology department, so make sure that's true. And give them at least 2 weeks' time to write it up and get it out. If they already have one written, then perhaps they don't need as much time to send it out, but you need to give them at least 2 weeks for the first letter you write. All right, thank you guys very much. I appreciate it, and I hope you got something good out of this workshop. Okay, thank you. Bye.